Hey guys, welcome back to Small Trees. Today's video is probably going to be a little short. I bought a new microphone, a new camera, and a new outdoor microphone that I'm wanting to test out. The voiceover microphone that I bought is the Shure MV7. So let me know. Hopefully the audio quality improves drastically, which is what I've been trying to fix, as I'm sure many of you know. So let me know in the comments if this has helped a lot. I had a question recently, a couple of questions actually, how to best heal big cut wounds on trees, as well as how to thicken the trunk without having big scars to deal with. And I got an answer for both of those. I got a short answer and I have a long answer, but I'm going to go into it really quickly. Okay, so my favorite of the two questions would be how to thicken the trunk in general, because if you've noticed, that's really what I enjoy doing on this channel is dealing with root bases and building trunks for good foundations for the future. So I feel like I can answer this one pretty handily. The quick answer to how to thicken the trunk without major scars is you don't do it quickly. You're either going to grow the tree quickly and have big scars, or you're going to grow it more slowly and make more consistent chops, I guess, and have smaller scars to deal with. So I'll go through my methods, I guess, of how I deal with scars on trees and how I deal with thickening the trunks. So in my opinion, there are a couple of ways that you can do this. You can either plant the tree in the ground and forget about it for a couple of years, which works well for thickening a tree quickly. But it's not something everyone can do. Everyone doesn't have a backyard or a place in the ground they can plant a tree and leave it. A lot of people live in apartments. A lot of people just don't have that available land. So that's kind of a hard stop for some people. The bigger problem for me is that if you plant a tree in the ground and you do not work it at all for a couple of years, you're going to have a mess of roots that you're going to have to deal with. Just nothing on the same plane, roots that are, an inch and a half thick that are growing straight down, things of that nature. You're also going to have no taper whatsoever to deal with, which means you're going to have to make that cut and start the taper at some point. So I have what I believe is kind of a happy medium. If you've seen most of my videos, you've seen that I plant most of my seedlings through metal tiles, however you're going to call them, metal plates. A lot of people use wood or tile, actual ceramic tile. I believe you can actually break the tile with a hammer later, and it's supposedly easier to remove, but I use metal. I plant my seedlings through the metal, and I kind of sacrifice part of that first year into getting the tree to sprout new roots on a flat plane where that metal is. The metal will girdle it. It will it may not be even, but the roots that emerge will all be on the same plane, generally speaking, and that gives you a solid foundation to work with in the future. Now, what this does not do is it really doesn't set you back much in terms of growth. Most of these trees, they're first or second year seedlings anyway, but by the end of the growing season, most of mine are 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter. They grow pretty quickly. And what this does is you've saved yourself a couple of years of trouble down the road, really. If you've ever planted a tree in the ground and then dug it up to work it without doing any prior root work, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You can look at some of my first videos. I believe some of those trees had not had the roots worked on them, and it was just a mess. It'll save you a lot of trouble if you work the roots early. And And then once you've done that, you can let the tree grow freely for a couple of years without worrying too much about what that situation is going to look like when you dig it up to actually work the roots, the next time. Now, the second question was how to heal big cut wounds. And this is something that everyone's going to have to deal with if you are growing your own trees. A few things that will make it more easy. You always want to make sure that you make the cleanest cut possible whenever you're cutting your trees, whenever you're making those chops. You may make, sometimes I'll make a flat, rough cut with a handsaw or something like that. But when I'm actually making the cut that will be the foundation for that tree's taper or next area of movement, I want to make sure that I use not only a clean instrument, but something that's very sharp, be it a razor blade, or some people will use rotary tools and then use a razor blade afterwards to clean up. But you want to make sure that wound is as flat as possible. You want it to be 45 degrees or less. If you have a cut that is greater than 45 degrees, that is going to be a larger area that the tree's going to have to heal, and it's going to take a lot longer. It may not heal at all in worst case circumstance. But so you want to cut it as cleanly as you can. You want it flat, and if anything, you want it to be slightly concave, so that when the callus is rolling over, it will not protrude any, if that makes sense. It won't be sticking out. It will heal flat or slightly inward, so that it does not interrupt the image of the tree, the movement as the tree goes up, basically. So if you go back, I will put a little, video thing here of one of my old trees, one of the bigger ones. I had a big cut wound that I was working on. And you can see that I used some putty, I think it's Durham's. It's available in most hardware stores to fill some of that cavity of that wound. It was so large that some of the wood had rotted, and so I used that to make that flat area since there wasn't one in the first place. Secondly, I used you can use a wire brush or a razor blade or something in that category to slightly wound the inner diameter, the inner area of that callus every year if it looks like it may be slowing down. And you just want to rub it until you see a little bit of green. And what you've done is you have wounded the tree or that callus, and it will stimulate the tree to produce more callus tissue in that area. So that's one way that you can help clean those wounds or help those wounds to finish healing over. And if you do it correctly, if you've got like a flat or a concave area and you've worked it correctly and not allowed it to become bulbous or anything like that, you'll end with a wound that looks a lot like this one. And this is one of my big trident maples, and this wound has healed over very nicely. The only sign that it was ever cut was this tiny little line right here in the middle where the two sides of the callus converged, and you could get rid of that if you really wanted to. I've not messed with it, but you want to make sure that you always cover your wounds with some sort of putty or paste. There are a multitude of different brands and different types. Some are thicker, some are more like the school glue until they dry. Whatever works best for you. You want to make sure that you cover that area to prevent any pathogens from getting into the tree and harming it. You want to prevent additional moisture from getting in, but you also want to prevent the wound area from drying out. So you want to make sure that you always have your wounds covered with putty. That is one of the easiest and best things that you can do to help one of those wounds heal, and as quickly and as inobtrusively, as possible. You want that wound to be unnoticeable when you finish. There are two other ways of producing a fairly large trunk quickly. They're not normally done because they're not really consistent, They produce kind of unnatural results, and they're not very consistent. But I've got one in my garden here that I'm trying just for fun. And it's basically the same thing where I plant several trees in the same piece of metal and then let them grow freely for several years. And what you'll get, hopefully, is these trunks growing and fusing on top of that metal. And so in the span of a couple of years, instead of having a 1-inch trunk, you might have a 5-inch trunk, and you would just remove the extra trunks and just leave one. However, like I said, it's going to look unnatural. So unless you're really going for, a Halloween tree or something that's really unorthodox, it's not really the way to go. It's just something for fun. There's a second technique. I believe if you search like cyclone, trident, maple, something like that online, I've seen, I think it was like one guy took a bunch of trident maple seedlings and took a wire cone and twisted them around it going up and held them in place with wire, I believe. And as they grew, they fused, and in the span of, it ended up being 5 or 6 years, but the guy had like an 8-inch trunk trident maple. The problem that he had is if any of those seedlings died, he was left with a big gap that was hard to fill, and it never did look natural. It wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen. It was definitely an interesting project, but it wasn't something that I'd really want to invest the time or that many seedlings into. That is one way, something if you've got extra cuttings and you've got nothing to do with them and you want to try something like that. I'd love to see it. If anybody else has actually made one of these, like what I'm talking about, I'd love to see it because I've only seen one online, and maybe you can change my mind. Maybe I can try to do one. And that's all I've got for today. Thank you guys for watching. You gave me a chance to try out my new microphone and camera. If you guys have any neat projects that you've undertaken, like the twisted trident I was talking about, please comment below with some pictures or just tell me about it. I'd love to hear about it. Until next time.